So thank you everybody for joining us today. The Strengthening Families Approach and Protective Factors Framework was introduced in 2003 by the Center for the Study of Social Policy. It's a research-informed, strengths-based approach that prevents child abuse and neglect by focusing on the well-being of all families and helping families identify and build on their own protective factors. The Doris Duke Charitable Foundation funded the original research with the Center for the Study of Social Policy and also funded the Alliance to engage its network of children's trust and prevention funds to demonstrate unique and innovative ways to implement the protective factors framework. Each of the protective factors is essential, but most important, it's what they do together to build strength and stability in families. Today's presentation is a portion of the Resilience course. There are additional courses for each protective factor and a reflection course. This training is designed to be delivered to those that work with children and families in any field, and funding for today's training is provided by the Wyoming Children's Trust Fund. So I'm Nicole Nieder. I am the Business Office Coordinator here at the Trust Fund. I have previously worked for the Department of Corrections, the Department of Family Services, the Wyoming Guardianship Corporation before joining the Trust Fund in November of 2020. And if you all would be willing to put your name, where you work, maybe the area that you are in Wyoming in the chat box, that just helps us to understand who we are reaching. And I am going to now pass it over to my co-presenter to introduce herself.
Hello all, my name is Faith Joy. I'm an intern with the Wyoming Children's Trust Fund. I am a senior at the University of Wyoming in the major of social work. So I am just here to kind of help facilitate this process, and I'll be presenting. And if any of you guys have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat.
Thanks, Faith. So the Protective Factors Framework and this training is designed to be used with anyone who works with children and families in any field. No matter where your work with children and families falls within the spectrum of the various systems, it's important to view the building of protective factors in a holistic manner. Understanding concrete ways you can support the building of protective factors in your own field may be illuminated by the challenges experienced in other fields as well. The lens we encourage you to look at families through is a strength-based lens. We want you to focus on what is strong in families and not what's wrong with families. The strength-based theory does not mean that we ignore weaknesses or problems. Finding solutions to problems and addressing the risk factors in families is certainly important. It prevents failure and helps families survive. However, if we always singularly focus on fixing families, that they will always be then in survival mode. If we want families to thrive, we must concentrate on what families are doing well and build upon that. We must look at families through a different lens and focus on what is strong so that they can thrive. This work is not linear, meaning we must help families survive before we can help them thrive. The Strengthening Families Protective Factors Framework outlines strategies that help us address risk factors while all the time building protective factors. So what will happen when we think about what is right with people rather than fixating on what is wrong with them? This is a quote from Donald O. Clifton.
gesture from residents of the Lost Dogs home this morning.
The Human Walking program provides desk-bound Melburnians a chance to get out of the office, get some exercise and make a new best friend.
It's hoped two-legged participants become so enamored with the experience they'll eventually decide to adopt their companion.
It's a wonderful idea. In fact, it's where the dogs are doing the rescuing.
Just on Little Collins Street. Well, Liars.
Here's a fun way to pass the time during your lunch break by walking a dog. This is a great idea.
The Lost Dogs Home is having a human walking program event,
encouraging office workers to get out from behind their desks, put those deadlines to one side, and get to know a dog that's up for adoption at the Lost Dogs Home.
They're all exceptionally attractive dogs.
I patted nearly every dog here. Yeah. Fell in love with a couple of them. Yeah, I wouldn't mind taking a couple of them home, actually.
Wish it was a weekly thing. Yeah, that would be really good. Yeah.
So in this video, think about how this would encourage you to use a different lens in the work that you do. So there are three common and important threads that run throughout the entire curriculum. Understanding and communicating the importance of how to use the framework as we go about our everyday work. The importance of culture, how culture impacts families as they seek to build protective factors, and how our own culture shapes how we individually feel, act, and think. The critical role parents play in strengthening families, viewing parents as valuable partners in every phase of the work. Strengthening Families Protective Factors Framework is not just another program to add on to your to-do list. It doesn't come with detailed instructions for implementation. Rather, it's an approach to work with families that can be interpreted and applied in a variety of different settings. In most cases, Strengthening Families is implemented through a series of small but significant changes to your daily practice rather than large-scale program modifications. So we're going to do a little test to see how comfortable everybody is in Zoom. We'd like you to raise your Zoom hand if you have received training on ACEs previously. Great. So you guys are experts. You got the thumbs up and the clapping. Perfect. Thank you. Oh, and everybody, I didn't even have to ask. You're putting your Zoom hands down. That's even better. So the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or the ACE study, has this far been the largest and most influential study about the relationship between negative experiences children have and the long-term effect those experiences may have on them when they are adults. The study found that children exposed to significant risk factors like abuse and neglect and other family dysfunctions are far more likely to suffer from health risks like chronic respiratory problems, substance or alcohol addictions, depression, adolescent pregnancies, and even early death. This study, perhaps more than any other, has changed the way that physicians, therapists, social workers, and other clinicians look at childhood trauma. Although the ACE study revealed legitimate connections between childhood trauma and subsequent health issues, adult health issues, there are a vast number of people who, despite their earlier experiences, have none of those poor outcomes. Recent research supports the fact that protective factors like positive influences in children's lives can eliminate potential negative outcomes in adults. And when people hear about the ACE study findings, they often ask about resilience. People get excited about the notion of resilience, in part because it reminds us that our supportive actions matter. Our desire for resilience leads naturally to a search for ways to help families and communities. 3 protective systems interact and guide positive adaptation. These powerful systems are individual capabilities, attachment and belonging with caring and competent people, and protective community, faith, and cultural processes. So we're going to do another little activity. So put the letter A in the chat box if you know someone who has experienced adversity during their childhood and you think of him or her as a successful adult. Okay, there are quite a lot of you. So what do we know about individuals who do well despite that adversity? We know that the 3 protective systems are nested. People do best when they are living in thriving families and communities. We can help one another to develop personal attributes that help us all weather life's storms. So one way to understand the development of resilience is to visualize a balance scale or a seesaw. Protective experiences and coping skills on one side counterbalance the significant adversity on the other. Resilience is evident when a child's health and development tips towards those positive outcomes, even when a heavy load of factors is stacked on the negative outcome side. The Center for the Study of Social Policy developed their own framework for looking at the protective factors that can help to strengthen families and in turn build up their children's ability to cope with life's challenges. The 5 protective factors, as shown in the diagram on the screen, are parental resilience, social connections, knowledge of parenting and child development, concrete support in times of need, and social and emotional competence of children. By taking the everyday actions shown in the larger boxes, for resilience, this includes demonstrating in multiple ways that parents are valued, honoring each family's race, their language, culture, history, and approach to parenting, encouraging parents to manage stress effectively, support parents as decision makers and help build decision-making and leadership skills, help parents understand how to buffer their children during stressful times. The result will be strengthened families, optimal child development, and reduced likelihood of child abuse and neglect. The Child and Family Partnership Chart outlines how parents can be role models for resilience in their children. For example, when parents show attention and affection, kids learn to feel loved and connected, and they have a sense of self-worth. Other parental behaviors and their impact on children are shown in the figure on this slide. Resilience is the result of a dynamic interaction between a person's biology and their external experiences. Resiliency is affected by the way the brain, the immune system, and genes respond to experiences during the person's development. This has to be considered when trying to understand why some children have unexpectedly positive outcomes despite adversity. Such variations are because the brain circuitry interacts with the caregiving environment and social context. Biological differences may explain why some babies or children are more sensitive to those stressful experiences. Resilience is dynamic through the lifespan. It's affected by personal experiences, social circumstances, culture, and the political environment, in addition to inherited or biological factors. Stressors may appear later in life, such as poor relationships, negative life events, war or natural disasters, and these may affect one's ability to adapt. Protective and risk factors are the 2 elements in the development of resilience. Resilience is often referred to as the ability to bounce back from adversity. This definition implies that individuals use internal and external resources available to them, which are protective factors, to overcome the difficulties or the risk factors. While their name is self-explanatory, Truly understanding protective and risk factors and the way they interact in people's lives is worth some explanation. So protective factors are attributes, life skills, strengths, or resources that help shield an individual from the development or worsening of undesirable health conditions and enhance their capacity to cope. So an example of this is adequate sleep. It's an important element in protecting someone against symptoms of mood disorders, such as anxiety and depression. Risk factors are attributes that contribute to the development or worsening of undesirable conditions. So an example is risk factors would include oppositional behaviors, family conflict, and social isolation. Any of those might increase the risk of mood disorders or maladaptive behaviors such as drug and alcohol consumption.
I have 5 children, and my children were placed in foster care due to domestic violence. It was the most difficult thing I ever encountered as a parent. Domestic violence for me was very normal because it was something that I grew up with, and it was everyday life. So to have someone point it out to you as a neglectful parent was very shocking for me to understand and to deal with. And it broke my heart to put my children in that position. Having your children in foster care, it's very challenging. You're dealing with your emotions, your anger, your frustration, trying to understand the process and why your children are coming into the foster care system, but also trying to keep life as normal as it can be for them. When I visited with my children once a week, it was very important for me to bring some of that normal to the visits, and I chose to bring dinner, a home-cooked meal that will help us remind us of the good times back at home. I was very scared of failing my children again once I became reunited with them. Once protective services is involved with your life, it impacts you for the rest of your life, and it was very important for me to make sure that my children were safe again. In order for me to get reunited with my children, I had to do several things. Parenting classes, domestic violence therapy, and at that time I really did not understand the reasons why I was asked to do these things, but I did them because I wanted my children back. And now today I can see the advantage of having those services. That actually led me to go out into my community and get educated on what services really work for families. I started advocating and just helping parents translate those emotions that they were having with the social workers, and vice versa, helping social workers understand how parents felt. It wasn't that we were just angry parents that didn't care or were neglectful. Sometimes we just needed the right resource at the right time, the right person to make a difference in our lives. And that led me to really just get educated and involved in the community to help those other families that were in my same situation, dealing with the same things I was dealing with. But now the difference was that they had someone there that went through it that could provide a little bit of support in the navigation of the system. I believe that a major reason for my strength and my resilience was the team that I had to help me, which was the foster parent, the social worker, and community leaders, helping me navigate those systems that I was clueless to.
So think about Nancy's story. I'm going to drop some questions in the chat so you guys can review them. But think about, in what ways did Nancy show resilience? What stood out to you in Nancy's story? And in what ways did her resilience show up? So you guys are welcome to drop those answers in the chat if you feel like sharing. That's something to just kind of reflect on as well. One of the challenges in using a strength-based approach to families is that it forces us to come face-to-face with our own perspectives about families. Sometimes our own experiences and values may keep us from recognizing and appreciating genuine strengths in families that are different from our own. Here is a very general example of what that might look like. So if your background and experiences have caused you to have reservations about childbearing outside of marriage or possibly around divorce, it may be difficult for you to see the strengths in families headed by single parents. Unless you recognize that bias and find a way to set it aside, you will likely struggle to work with single parents without judgment and in a genuinely positive way. Parents will very likely pick up on your disapproval, whether they understand the reason behind it or not. So one helpful strategy for identifying family strengths is to look at the family from the child's point of view. Is the child experiencing nurturing, comfort, and love? Are the child's needs being met? Is the child getting guidance to grow and learn in a positive way? Often the answers to these questions will help you recognize whether your concerns about a family are warranted or whether you could be based on biases that have little to do with how well a family can raise and protect their children. A great quote from one of the participants from a previous training is to name it, claim it, but most importantly, tame it. This means recognize your bias. There is likely a name for it, so you can claim it, understand it, and where it comes from. Tame it, consciously change your lens when looking at this family. What is the child's point of view? It also means beyond changing your lens, change your conversation. What we say about families to other people and other families is contagious. Working across cultures can sometimes make it difficult to appreciate other families' strengths. We are not often even aware of the way culture influences our beliefs around children and their care. Our goals and expectations for our children come in large part from our culture's beliefs, our values, and assumptions. This includes how we express love and nurturing, as well as how we maintain discipline and set limits for children. Our parenting practices guide children into developing the qualities and behaviors that are valued in our culture. We interpret behavior and interactions based in part on our own culture. When a family's culture is similar to ours, these interpretations may be accurate. When a family's culture is different from ours, we may interpret a message or a behavior differently than the family intended. So let's look at the example of independence versus interdependence. The majority of culture in the United States values independence and self-sufficiency very highly, and many parents encourage their children to increase their independence as soon as they are able. We can see this in the push for young toddlers to feed themselves and in parents' encouragement and independent exploration and rejection of possible clingy behavior. However, many other cultures value interdependence. Parents in these cultures may discourage toddlers' attempts at self-feeding and encourage more physical closeness and dependence when they are young. Depending on your own perspective and your cultural backgrounds, one of these sets of behaviors may seem different or even wrong to you at first. You may feel that some parents are stifling their children's development if your culture values independence above interdependence. And if you're coming from a value of interdependence, you may feel that some parents are pushing their children away and forcing them to grow up too quickly. It's important to remember that each approach reflects parents' love of their children and their attempts to nurture the values they hold dear. When it comes to strength-based work with families, it's critical to take a family's culture into account as you observe their family situations and interactions. By being aware of the influence your own culture has on your reactions and trying to see the intent behind another person's decisions, you may be more able to identify a family's strengths and work with them in a positive manner. So research tells us there are a few things that help to develop resilience in adulthood. Connecting with an empathetic and understanding person can remind you that you're not alone in the midst of whatever difficulties you're going through. Focus on finding trustworthy and compassionate individuals who will validate your feelings, which will support the skill of resilience. The pain of traumatic events can lead some people to isolate themselves, but it's important to accept help and support from those who care about you. Whether you go on a weekly date night with your spouse or plan a lunch out with a friend, try to prioritize genuinely connecting with people who care about you. Self-care may be a popular buzzword, but it's also a legitimate practice for mental health and building resilience. That's because stress is just as much physical as it is emotional. Promoting a positive lifestyle factors like proper nutrition, ample sleep, lots of hydration, and regular exercise can strengthen your body to adapt to stress and reduce the toll of emotions like anxiety or depression. Develop some realistic goals and do something regularly, even if it's like a small accomplishment. That enables you to move toward the things you want to accomplish. Instead of focusing on tasks that seem unachievable, ask yourself, what's one thing I can do to accomplish today that can help me move in the direction I want to go? The important thing to remember is you're not alone on this journey. While you may not be able to control all of your circumstances, you can grow by focusing on the aspects of life's challenges you can manage with the support of loved ones and trusted professionals. We can add to the positive side of the resilience scale by piling on positive experiences, especially through responsive relationships. The one thing that most children who develop resilience have in common is a stable, committed relationship with a supportive parent, a caregiver, or another adult. And adults need those supportive relationships also. So during a crisis like the COVID-19 outbreak, families needed their immediate basic needs met before they could focus on anything else. But when the crisis was over, the longer-term programs that support adults and children in building and practicing their core skills will again be necessary and effective. This can be applied to families' needs outside of a pandemic as well. And I'm going to drop a article in the chat that you guys are welcome to look at.
Resiliency, simply defined, means the ability to recover from difficult life experiences and often to be strengthened by or even transformed by these experiences. Resilient parents have empathy for themselves and others and are able to keep a positive attitude, solve problems creatively, and take life events in stride. They're able to bounce back from negative experiences and find a way to be the parent they want to be, no matter what is going on around them. Resilience isn't about how many bad things you experience. It's about how you respond to them. A very resilient person might have dozens of risk factors and negative experiences and still thrive. A less resilient person might have one negative experience that sends them into a downward spiral. Most of us have some negative experiences throughout our lives that we handle and recover from in varying degrees. In fact, we all have varying levels of resilience, which can change over time. Each time we are faced with a challenge, our resilience is tested. We might develop a greater resilience through the experience or have a setback in our resilience. Luckily, resilience isn't something you either have or don't have. It's not something you use up and lose. Rather, it's a skill we build throughout our lives, especially when we find ways to get through a challenge. Resiliency is important because most resilient parents are stronger parents. Parents who are more resilient will be able to take good care of their children, even when they are experiencing a crisis. Their children are less likely to be abused, which can happen when parents are under stress or repeating negative patterns they have learned in their own childhood. Their children are less likely to be neglected, which can happen when parents are depressed or too consumed by their own problems to provide for their children's needs. Resilient parents have more patience with their children day to day, but especially in times of stress. This is why resilience is considered a protective factor against child maltreatment.
turned to her confused daughter and asked her what she saw. "Carrots, eggs, and coffee," her daughter replied. Her mother brought her closer to the bowls and asked her to feel the carrots. They were soft and mushy. Then she asked her daughter to take an egg and break it. The egg was hard-boiled inside. Finally, her mother asked her to take a sip of the coffee. The daughter smiled as she brought the mug to her lips, savoring the aroma and the rich taste of the coffee. "What does it mean, Mother?" she finally asked. Her mother explained that the carrots, eggs, and coffee had each reacted differently when they faced the same adversity, the boiling water. The carrot went in strong, firm, and unrelenting, but wilted when subjected to the boiling water, becoming soft and weak. The egg started out fragile, a thin shell protecting its liquid interior, but became hardened by the heat. The coffee beans were unique. They were not drastically changed, but they transformed the boiling water instead. "Which are you?" the mother asked.
So after watching this video, how do you guys think this video relates to resiliency? You want to go ahead and throw your answers in the chat box and just go ahead and look at a couple of different answers. So this video gets to the heart of transformation that occurs with true resiliency. It also demonstrates how we can take on the characteristics of the carrot, egg, and coffee bean during times of stress. But we are not always the carrot, the egg, or the coffee bean. Sometimes things we consider to be difficulties in our lives can also end up being our strengths. For example, a person who has a disability often develops skills of independence and fortitude that are not always present in those who are not equally challenged. Or sometimes when families do not have a lot of resources, they create games, toys, activities as a family, and the bond created by the teamwork becomes the strength. Some of you may have heard this story before or a version similar. An elderly Chinese woman had 2 large pots, each hung on the ends of a pole which she carried across her neck. One of the pots had a crack in it, while the other pot was perfect and always delivered a full portion of water. At the end of the long walk from the stream to the house, the cracked pot arrived only half full. For a full 2 years, this went on daily, with the woman bringing home only 1.5 pots of water. Of course, the perfect pot was proud of its accomplishments. But the poor cracked pot was ashamed of its own imperfection and miserable that it could only do half of what it had been made to do. After 2 years of what it perceived to be bitter failure, it spoke to the woman one day by the stream. "I am ashamed of myself because this crack on my side causes water to leak out all the way back to your house." The old woman smiled. "Did you notice that there are flowers on your side of the path, but not on the other pot side? That's because I've always known about your flaw, so I planted flower seeds on your side of the path. And every day while we walk back, you water them. For 2 years, I've been able to pick these beautiful flowers to decorate the table. Without you being just the way you are, there would not be this beauty to grace the house." Each of us has our own unique flaw, but it's the cracks and flaws we each have that make our lives together so very interesting and rewarding. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat. It's a guide that we are dropping. It's to help engage parents and caregivers in personalized, constructive conversations about how those protective factors contribute to positive outcomes for families. The guides are available in both English and Spanish. On this slide is an example of one of the conversation guides to use when working with families. This guide focuses on the importance of strong early bonds with caregivers to build healthy brains, emphasizing that nurturing is important for all ages, as well as exploring and acknowledging differences in how families show affection. The guide includes questions to ask such as, did you know that love you show for your children actually grows their brains and makes them smarter? And I'm interested in learning how love and affection are expressed in your family. You can then go through the list and ask parents to mark the ways they like to show affection to their children. You can also encourage the parent or caregiver to add other ways that are not on the list. then encourage parents to write one thing on the calendar that they can do each day to show their children how much they are loved. This is just one of several activities within the guide. Parenting is hard, but there are everyday actions that you can take to build resilience in your life and the lives of others. Some examples are demonstrate in multiple ways that parents are valued, that this does not have to be anything extravagant, but simple actions that add up over time. Honor each family and their approach to parenting. Encourage parents to manage their stress effectively through evidence-based practices as well as mindfulness, yoga, and general self-care. Support parents as decision makers for their children, and help parents understand how to use their own skills for helping their children during stressful times. This can include de-escalation techniques and educating parents on age-appropriate expectations. Let's talk about youth resilience. Adolescence can be a very happy and exciting developmental period, but it can also have its shared stress. The stress that youth experience, like the stress that individuals experience at any stage of development, is caused by the pressures or stressors that are placed on them and can come from many different sources. Some examples are typical events and life changes, such as taking a driver's exam or physical changes. Unexpected events like parents divorcing or being involved in a car accident. Individual factors like substance abuse or trauma history. Interpersonal factors such as bullying at school or relationship problems, as well as community, societal, or environmental conditions. Some stressors youth face can be easily managed so that problems get resolved. For example, working with a tutor when additional help is needed to understand schoolwork. But some stressors cannot be easily resolved. Youth cannot fix their parents' broken relationship, erase the abuse they suffered, or be able to move out of a crime-plagued neighborhood. Rather, youth are resilient when they are able to call forth their inner strength to positively meet challenges, manage adversities, heal the effects of trauma, and thrive given their unique characteristics, goals, and circumstances. There is increasing evidence, however, that the effects of toxic stress can be mitigated by experiences that help to build youth's resilience. Experiences that foster a consistent relationship with at least one safe, caring, reliable, and competent adult who promotes high expectations and encourages self-improvement, provides opportunities for productive decision-making and constructive engagement in their family, community, school, and other social institutions, encourage adolescent voice, choice, and personal responsibility, as well as promoting the development of self-regulation, self-reflection, self-confidence, self-compassion, and character, all help build youth resilience. Research studies show that in addition to helping youth who experience toxic stress to manage responses to their histories of adversity, these experiences help to build all youth resilience so that they are on developmental trajectory toward healthy, positive outcomes. Resilient people are aware of situations, their own emotional reactions, and the behavior of those around them. By remaining aware, they can maintain control of a situation and think of new ways to tackle problems. In many cases, resilient people emerge stronger after such difficulties. Some ways that resiliency may look is having hope, optimism, or self-confidence, being able to problem solve, practicing self-care and willingness to ask for help, an ability to manage negative emotions, not allowing stress to interfere with nurturing, and having a positive attitude about parenting and their children. This video is called Resiliency: Anticipate, Organize, Adapt. Before we play this video, we ask to have a pen and paper or use a device to take notes during the video. This video has sound but no spoken words, so try as much as possible to keep your eyes on the screen. Write a list of words that come to mind as you watch the video and think about resilience. All right. So if any of you feel comfortable, if you guys just want to go ahead and put some of those words that you listed out and throw them in the chat box. Okay. Another program strategy to build parental resilience is to respond to family crises. By being there when families most need support, you can bolster parents' resilience or help them develop resilience that they may not have had before. One resilience researcher, Dr. Mark Katz, summarizes resilience as strength in the face of adversity. Resilience is the lifelong process of enduring and growing through crisis and change. No one can prevent stress or crisis from happening to families at some point in time. A variety of strategies can help families find the tools they need to respond effectively so crisis does not escalate and the fallout from the crisis does not negatively impact their parenting. Sometimes we hear resilience referred to as bouncing back, but it is also the ability to bounce forward, to use moments of stress and crisis to effectively motivate yourself, reorganize your priorities and actions, and move on. In the Strengthening Families framework, we think about two different components of resilience: the ability to function well under stress in general, as well as the ability to parent well in times of stress. Caregivers may exhibit greater resilience in one area than in the other. We need to think about both as we look at how we can support parents in building their resilience. People sometimes think of resilience as an innate, but research shows that it is highly influenced by one's environment. We have all heard about the concept of learned helplessness. When people get the message that they can't succeed or they are prevented from succeeding, it saps the will to even try to succeed. Helping families build resilience is the reverse of this concept, providing an environment that is positive and validating and encouraging the skills and internal resources that help individuals to cope effectively when things are difficult. Everyday actions by service providers and programs can create trust and confidence with families, which in turn fosters the resilience families need to be the parents their children need. As we've discussed in this presentation, resilience is the ability to recover from difficult life experiences and how we can be strengthened or even transformed by those experiences. You've learned a lot about resilience and about strategies and everyday actions that will help you support parents in building their resilience. Something as simple as casual conversation can also build a parent's resilience. When you talk to parents, try to recognize their strengths and reflect those back to them. Let them know what they are doing well. Helping parents to identify their strengths and resources can help build resiliency in times of need. Resilient parents have stronger families, promote optimal development in their children, and are less likely to abuse or neglect their children. Remember, we are all resilient. You never know when you are minutes away from a breakthrough, when you are one project away from the promotion, when you are 1 hour of studying away from passing the exam, or when you are one song away from landing the record deal. That is why you keep going. That is why you keep trying. That is why when you fall down, you stand back up. Because the truth is, too many people quit before even giving themselves a real chance. They stop because it isn't happening fast enough or how they thought it would work out. My beautiful friends, remember that all good things take time. Be patient and your time will come too. So we have one question survey for you to complete to provide us feedback on this webinar. We'll be putting it in the chat and please feel free to fill this out for us. And with that, this concludes today's webinar. Thank you for joining us today and feel free to reach out with any questions at the contact information, which will be on the next slide.